West Denver. Sleep deprived and heavily caffeinated.
All right, let's do this then.
This is the Jeff and Bill Show.
I don't agree with that.
They don't always agree, but hey, at least they have coffee.
Coffee.
And each other.
I love you, man.
God help us.
I want to bless him. We need all the help we can get.
Now here's Jeff Hunt and Bill Thorpe. The Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS.
10 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights, hottest takes from the right, left, and center. Yesterday, President Trump championing religious freedom, unveiling America Prays. In a powerful address at the Museum of the Bible, President Trump emphasized the enduring role of faith in America's identity, highlighted his administration's unwavering defense of faith-based values, and reaffirmed his commitment to protecting our religious freedom. He also launched the America Prays initiative, a call for Americans to unite in prayer for the nation's strength, peace, and prosperity as the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence approaches. My question to you all, to our listeners today, can America exist without its spiritual traditions? What I mean by spiritual is its Judeo-Christian values. Can you have a secular America? Join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. 303-696-1971 or text us on the Dan Capitalist Law text line at 720-819-5115. Now it's time for News and Comment with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, News and Comment.
Good morning. Tuesday, 62 and a little cloudy outside in Denver, expecting a high of 86 today. This portion of the news sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234 to learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley files legislation requiring all federal buildings nationwide to display "In God We Trust." Great idea. Cleaning up D.C., the crime in the streets, and displaying "In God We Trust" on federal buildings. I like it. Commies won't. Missouri State House last night advanced the new 2026 congressional map that will give Republicans yet another seat in the House. DJT will sign a proclamation today in the Oval Office at 2:30, and Caroline Leavitt will hold a press conference briefing at 11 to discuss. Homeland Security is announcing an immigration operation dubbed Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago. DJT wants to clean up the city's crime problem. Imagine that. And Don Lemon's on the streets of New York these days, running into people, and a lady who likes what DJT is doing with crime. Looky, hey, in New York and across the country. Amazing how that works.
A little bit.
Do you think we need the National Guard on the streets here?
What?
National Guard on the streets to help with crime.
Maybe more.
You think National Guard or just more police?
More police.
What about armed military?
I think it's good. If we are going to be safe,
Then you're all for it.
yes.
All right. Well, nice to meet you.
The better is we are safe.
Yeah.
It's the important thing.
Thank you. And you live in the Bronx.
Yes.
How long have you lived there?
8 years.
8 years. From?
Yes, I'm from Dominican.
From Dominican. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
All right, so she says more police and more National Guard. Hey, it's just common sense. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, has now lifted a lower court's restraining order that barred using race and ethnicity as a tactic in stopping people during immigration enforcement operations in L.A. Both California Governor Newsom and L.A. Mayor Bass have denounced the ruling. Of course they have.
I mean, the more you think about it, the more you're like, dude, all right, we have 10 million people that have come in, most from a particular part of the world. And in that part of the world, they speak a certain language, all right? When they come to this country, they tend to work a particular set of jobs. Only a dumb nation captured by woke ideology would go, you know, we're not going to enforce our immigration laws and not go ask the people standing over there that are speaking the language, working the jobs, and living in the city that they all moved to, whether or not they're here illegally. Because just asking them the question might be offensive.
Yes.
Good night.
Cannot offend them. We all need to get as many vaccine shots as possible and let them all in through the open gates of our loving country, and don't offend them. Don't you dare offend them. Assistant DA for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon says it's horrible what happened to the victim in Charlotte. And we find out today, in the past 10 years, over 750 criminals in Charlotte have been arrested and let go 14 or more times in that county of Wake County, and those commie judges.
Well, look, it's very tragic what happened in this jurisdiction. It's the kind of thing that you're seeing happening all over the United States. And from the federal civil rights perspective, my angle is whether there is discrimination occurring by local law enforcement in how they treat offenders. And so, for example, in Hennepin County, Minnesota, we're investigating their blatant policy, which says that they will give preferential plea agreements to people of color. Now, that's illegal under the law. I don't know whether Charlotte has a similar problem. It may be the case, and we'd love for people with evidence to come forward, whistleblowers to come forward. If they are treating offenders of a particular race more leniently than, say, white offenders, that would be a federal civil rights violation. But
we're going to find out a lot more in a lot of cities across the country, like Charlotte. All right. Had to cough there.
They're bringing all-out blitz. They're expecting the ball to come out quicker than what it did.
McCarthy. Pass is caught. Spinning grab by Aaron Jones. And somehow, some way, the Minnesota Vikings are on top.
And speaking of Minnesota, the Vikings come back to beat the Bears last night on Monday Night Football, 27-24. 59 in Sheridan, 60 in Louisville, 62 in Denver. I'm losing my voice. Jeff and Billy continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
The weather won't change much day to day. Over the next several days, we're going to see about the same temperatures day and night, and a chance daily that a few showers and thunderstorms will pop up here and there. Highs today through Friday will be in the 80s, nighttime lows 50s with scattered afternoon and evening thunderstorms. Weather is a service of L&L Heating and Air Conditioning. For quick, trustworthy, and dependable service, call L&L Heating and Air Conditioning at 720-851-1691. Visit them online at bestdenverhvac.com. You'll be comfortable with L&L. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
President Trump at the Museum of the Bible yesterday, one of my favorite museums. Absolutely beautiful. I've been in that room. I've hosted events in that room. It's a fantastic museum right there in the heart of Washington, D.C. Reminds you of the importance of the Bible and the formation of this nation, of Western civilization. In fact, its connections to the Old Testament, New Testament, all that stuff there. I've spent hours at the Museum of the Bible and still haven't seen it all. I love it. Great place. Congratulations to the Green family who put that all together. Trump with a powerful address yesterday at the Museum of the Bible, the White House saying President Trump emphasized the enduring role of faith in America's identity, highlighted his administration's unwavering defense of faith-based values, and reaffirmed his commitment to protecting our religious freedoms. The president also launched the America Prays Initiative, a call for Americans to unite in prayer for the nation's strength, peace, and prosperity as the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence approaches. So, here's some of the highlights of what he talked about yesterday. And my question to our listeners, and you guys can be calling in, would love to hear from you, text in as well, is can America exist as an atheist nation? Could it continue? Give us a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. Here's what Trump did yesterday. He affirmed our nation's founding principles. When faith gets weaker, our country seems to get weaker, he says. When faith gets stronger, good things happen for our country. It's amazing the way it seems to work that way. Under the Trump administration, we're defending our rights and restoring our identity as a nation under God. We are one nation under God, and we will always be. President Trump also called for Americans to come together in prayer. Next year, we'll celebrate 250 years since the Declaration was signed. As part of the grand commemoration, we've invited America's great faith communities to pray for our nation, for our people, and for peace in the world. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner, announced that more than 70 faith organizations and churches have joined together to participate in America Prays initiative. Think about the miracles that would take place over the next year, the transformation that you and I could witness in communities all across the land. President Trump previewed new rules protecting Americans' right to pray in public schools. I'm pleased to announce this morning that the Department of Education will soon issue new guidance protecting the right to prayer in our public schools. President Trump highlighted the importance of faith in God. To have a great nation, you have to have religion. I believe that so strongly. There has to be something after we go through all of this, and that something is God. President Trump defended our American values of faith. America has always been a nation that believes in the power of prayer, and we will never apologize for our faith. Ever, ever, never, never. He said, we will never surrender our God-given rights. We will defend our liberties, our values, our sovereignty, and we will defend our freedom. President Trump welcomed a 12-year-old California student who was forced in school to read material contrary to his religious beliefs. Last year, in 5th grade, Shay was forced to read a book to a kindergarten student promoting a message of radical gender ideology that is contrary to his religious beliefs and ours. And President Trump admonished a Democrat senator for denying that our rights come from God. The need for this commission has never been more clear than what was last week when the ineffectual senator from Virginia, a man named Tim Kaine, stated that the notion our rights come from our Creator is extremely troubling to him. It's this Declaration of Independence that proclaims we are endowed by our Creator with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The senator from Virginia should be ashamed of himself. Can America exist without its religious values? Jay from Louisville. Yes, we could have an atheist America and things would be fine. This is coming from a Catholic, by the way, he writes. I disagree. I think America is uniquely Christian with strong ties to Judeo-Christian values, what we inherited from our Jewish friends. But what has made America successful is our strong Christian values. John Adams said that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. When I was working for the Centennial Institute, we went back and looked at the early constitutions of each one of these states. And just about every single one of them did have a religious test. Now, I'm not asking for there to be a religious test today. in order to hold office. But to deny that America was founded on Christian values is just ahistorical. It's just wrong. Christianity was critical to the formation of this nation. It is necessary to its continuance. Do you agree or disagree, Bill?
Which form of Christianity are we picking? Does it matter?
Generally Protestant.
Oh, well then, yeah, I disagree. Because I'm a Catholic. So I disagree.
Were you talking about which formation?
Which formation of Christianity are we talking about?
Continue to the future?
No, I just said which is important. No, you just said which is important. You said mostly Protestant. And I would disagree because
I thought you were talking about the history.
No.
What was generally the history of the nation was generally Protestant.
Yeah.
But no, I think Catholics are fine.
And they were, and the thing that I've got is they were Protestants that were fleeing, in many cases, religious persecution. And it was a unique tapestry of different forms of the Christian religion.
Correct.
So the idea that necessarily one is dominant per se, I go back to the either the example from Emo and Williams, or you can even just use Life of Brian and with Monty Python, where the idea of the Judea People's Front, or the People's Front of Judea. It's a great example inside of that movie, how based on how you identify yourself, you might be a heretic or you might be one of us. And that's worrisome for me, is the idea that if we're going to say, well, it's just all Christianity, don't we eventually start choosing ones that are better than others, etc., and who goes where? I think that's problematic, especially in the founding of our nation. Also, while the founding fathers were influenced by Christianity, they had the ability to establish a church. They had the ability to outline it. They didn't. Not in the founding document. None of that. And so that's kind of the issue that I've got, that if we are going to assume that we are supposed to be a nation that is governed by Christianity or by even a religion, then that should have been there. The fact that they left it out, given all of their motivations and where they were pulling from, I think speaks volumes. Not what's in the Constitution, but what isn't there tells us a lot more about where they were, in my opinion.
I think you could make the argument that generally Christian values were necessary to the formation of this nation. They didn't require the creation of a particular church. But what you have happening in America now is a concerted effort to remove Christianity from the public square entirely, to have a, quote, secular nation. And I don't think America could stand as a secular nation.
Really? Why not?
Well, one, the foundation of our rights and where they come from, right? So this is where you get the Tim Kaine and the progressive, mind break of where do your rights come from if they don't come from God?
Could they come from society?
Do you want your rights coming from society?
But the idea is, okay, well, see, the fundamental thing is that I understand the idea of God-given rights, but I think that operationally here on earth, they do come from society. Whether we say they are God-given or not, they are granted by the society in which you choose to live in. So functionally, yes, they're granted by the society because that's how we've organized ourselves. So while we may say there are some God-given rights, that's not necessarily how we have set up our societies nor our countries. So I think that's kind of an issue when we talk about that, just in general. I just think operationally.
But, I mean, you're making the argument that because society has to wrestle over what rights are, they come from society. I think you would have a lot of arguments, particularly coming from the entire, the Magna Carta, and the effort of people to be able to govern themselves and not be governed by a king that was appointed by God, right? That whole debate was over where your rights come from. Because if your rights just come from the society itself, well, they could be easily taken away. There has to be a larger thing that's granting the rights of you being a human being than just what your neighbor decides those rights should be.
Let's do this just for edification. How would you define, for the conversation, how would you define those God-given rights? What would those be? And then we can evaluate how they're implemented and whether or not society honors those and how it's working.
Sure.
So what are those God-given
Sure.
rights?
I'll start with what the Declaration of Independence says, right? I think, since we're discussing what America is, that the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I kind of get a little squishy on the pursuit of happiness because I think it's vague. It was originally, according to English common law, the right to property. But I think that you're endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where those come from is not your neighbor. It comes from God. And without a Christian, Judeo-Christian understanding, and I want to include my Jewish friends because we inherit a lot of our Christian understanding from the Judeo worldview, that's where it comes from. It comes from God. Otherwise, your neighbor can just take it away, or the king can just take it away. And we've had this battle in Western civilization for hundreds of years about where those rights do come from.
How do you then define life and liberty? I understand the idea and the problematic of the pursuit of happiness because that can be transitional based on where we are, but how do you then define life and liberty?
I'm not sure what you mean. Like,
well, this is what I'm looking at, is the idea being that if it's a God-given right, and especially the idea that we talk about life and liberty, then there's a decent argument to be made that food, housing, and healthcare then should come from life and liberty. That should be part of the God-given rights. That in order for me to have my life and my liberty, I need to have access to food, shelter, and healthcare. Without those,
that's a progressive argument.
Yeah,
and that's the notion of a positive right versus a negative right.
But what I'm asking you is, does that then fit inside of this?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, why not?
Because in the cases you just laid out, somebody else has to do something in order to provide that, right? Like I have a God-given right to a house. Okay, well, who provides that? Versus what did God give you? Did God give you life, or did somebody else give you life?
Well, sure, God gave you life, but then
right.
What?
But did God give you a house?
But if he is giving me the right to life, shouldn't we then assume shelter, food, and healthcare would be part of that? Or is it just, hey, you're alive, good luck. And if you eat sticks, and if you guys all start murdering each other, good luck with that. Okay? I mean, that's the idea that we have. It is
no,
because
because one's a positive that requires other people to give you something. Healthcare, for instance, right? Healthcare isn't just the right to be healthy. It is the right to talk to a doctor, to get the surgeries I need, all that stuff. And so when you're making that a right in itself, you're now requiring other people to provide that service to you. Whereas the basic foundation of this nation was that our rights come from God and that it is the government's job not to give you those rights, right? But to defend those rights in themselves. And so it becomes a limited government, not a forceful government. The government isn't requiring doctors to provide medical care to other people. That's not the way we set up this country. We understood that our rights come from God. That's different than forcing other people to give you services. All right, let's go to the phone lines. Ben Morrison. Ben, can we have a secular nation?
Yes, we absolutely can, because we were not set up to be a Judeo-Christian nation. We were set up to be a nation that was based on logic and reason. The main thing that
do you think our founding documents say that?
Yes, they absolutely do. If you look at history, maybe you need to do a refresher on some of this, but we had Judeo-Christian governments basically for 1,500 years prior to the foundation of the U.S. So there was tons and tons of Judeo-Christian foundations in government prior to the foundation of the U.S. And what came out in the 17th and 18th century was the Enlightenment period. So you had people like Isaac Newton and John Locke and, all these free thinkers that all of a sudden started believing there was this essential notion to individual liberty and an individual foundation. So a lot of our founding fathers, for example, like Thomas Paine, give me liberty, give me death. Deist. He didn't believe in Jesus Christ. He believes there's a clockmaker God. And there's strong
But that's
evidence
not
that
secular.
Benjamin Franklin.
That's not secular.
That's not secular, but
Right.
it doesn't believe in Jesus Christ. That's not Judeo-Christian values. He just believes God set up the machine, hit start, and let it go, and then never interacted again. Thomas Jefferson, also someone considered pretty light Christian, but more heavily deist. George Washington is in that camp, as is Benjamin Franklin. So there's a lot of things that go into that. And if you look at how our Constitution was written, most of that stuff aligns with Enlightenment values that were around in that period. And we were one of the first major governments that was founded kind of around that phrasing. Not that phrasing, but that timeline.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is the common argument that because you mentioned two, out of all of the signers, how many were regular church attenders? You mentioned two, but how many out of the signers of the Declaration attended church regularly?
I named four, and Thomas Jefferson was kind of
56.
one of the heavy
56
lifters
is
on
the
that.
answer. 56
I know,
of
but
the signers.
Thomas Jefferson was kind of the heavy lifter on writing that whole thing, wasn't he, though?
Yeah, but he's not a secularist. So
no, he's not a secularist. But
the argument
that
the question I asked is, can America be a nation as a secular nation?
Yes, I know perfectly. Like,
so where do our rights come from if you don't believe in God?
From society. It's society grounded rules,
and that's
we determine.
And you want to live with that?
Yeah. Do you think God said we should have guns? Because where's that in the Bible? Where does God say that we can't have
Or is there
soldiers?
a democracy in the Bible?
It's not in there because democracy was
slavery's in there though.
Barely on the front.
Got a lot of slavery.
Yeah,
yeah,
and what was
in there.
And guys, what was the arguments in the Bible about slavery?
Well, I don't know, Jeff. I'd have to look up the verses, but like I can say that in Numbers, there's something where, like, let's say 2 days ago, did you see somebody working on Sunday? Because in Numbers, I'd have to look up the verse. I think it's 15:32 to 36. We're supposed to go stone those people.
Actually, we'd have to stone Peter Boyles
Sunday.
too, because he worked on Saturday. So we'd have to stone him.
So they're working on the Sabbath. So there's some junky stuff in the Bible that you may not want to acknowledge.
Let's go back to the idea of a secular nation and where your rights come from. So if your rights come from society, okay, there's an old argument that a pure democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. Why would you leave your rights up to your neighbor to determine?
Because we basically make social constructs, and I think there's a general agreement that exists among multiple religions all across the globe that it is wrong to steal, it is wrong to murder, and whether it's
and that's solely based on a social construct, you think?
I think, yeah, I do think.
So why not violate that?
Because there's laws that enforce that. Going back to Hammurabi's law and other things like that. There's penalties.
Ben, go take what your neighbor has. What's stopping you?
One, I have a sense of moral. I have my own sense of morals where I
and
realize
that
that's wrong.
Why is it wrong?
Why
not take what you want? You're going to get what your neighbor has. Why not take it?
My own sense of self-decency and how I'd feel and empathy towards my fellow human being. And I'm agnostic. I don't believe in a Judeo-Christian God, but I understand, like, if I did that to somebody else, they would feel bad, and I have a sense of empathy.
And they also could then turn around and do it to you. That's that idea, even though it is not religiously based, but the idea of the golden rule can exist in Ben's example outside necessarily of a religious example. He can decide that if I go and steal things from my neighbor, they can come and do that to me, so it's probably not a good idea for me to do that.
But guys, we're talking about setting up a society here. We're setting up a society.
I know, but I just said then I would choose not to do that. It's not a so. It gets us to the conclusion.
Go ahead, Ben.
Jeff, this is like teaching a kindergartner. Like, hey, you hit somebody and you're getting them in trouble. Like, would you like it if they came up and hit you? Like, no, they're kicking rocks and like, so that's why we
guys,
don't do that.
You think our society is based upon don't steal because somebody could steal from you? You think that's how we've set things up here?
Weren't you just arguing yesterday, Jeff, that cultural values are
Yes.
what kind of set stuff up?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and what I think I'm exposing here, Ben, is that your cultural values are actually Judeo-Christian in nature.
No, they're not, because there's so many different cultures in the world that can
But Ben,
expose
you
these same
just told
values.
me you don't steal because you have empathy for people.
Do you think the Dalai Lama, for example, is
I'm not talking about the Dalai
horrible
Lama. I'm talking about you, Ben.
I know, but you're talking about Judeo-Christian
And I
values are
think
the only
you have
source.
inherited a Judeo-Christian worldview that has built America, and America would not function without it.
Wrong. Try again.
Why?
Wrong.
Why? What you think Islamic values could maintain America?
I have very serious issues with Islamic values, mainly
So
maintaining the
Islamic
women.
values makes up 51 nations in this country, or in this world. So Islamic values aren't going to continue. How about atheistic? The real only atheistic nations out there are kind of like Cuba, Soviet Union, China, North Korea. You think those values would maintain America?
I think those are more political in nature rather than a religious sect where the government has basically taken over and said there is no religion. And that's a foundational thing where you're asserting a belief on a people rather than giving them the freedom to choose.
Okay, so where's the flourishing freedoms that we've enjoyed in America with a foundationally atheistic nation?
There's a difference between atheistic and a freedom to choose. So I don't think Judeo-Christian values and trying to impose on everyone is the right solution. As I said, I'm agnostic. So I'm the only religion in the world that's actually correct, which I love because I don't know, you don't know, and do you know what? I'm right about that.
I don't know what. I'm sorry, what? You broke up a little bit there.
I'm right about the fact that we don't know exactly what's going on, which is what makes agnosticism the only correct religious belief in the world.
I don't know if that's the case. So, Ben, let's look at some of the assumptions that you have. So, for instance, you talked about the Enlightenment, right? The idea that there is stability in this world, that for instance, gravity. That if gravity tends to fall at the same rate, that light
9.84 meters per second.
Right, great. And light travels at the same speed, right? So you have these consistent. So can't you say something about God, that he is consistent?
That doesn't necessarily mean he created that. It might just be a system that is in place, and that doesn't
Where'd
necessarily
that system
define
come
that.
from? What system just shows up?
There's a lot of things that just happen due to random happenstance.
But I'm talking about systems, like organized systems, like mathematics, gravity, knowledge, those types of things.
Sometimes there's just the way that some things work, and there may be a design to it, there may not be, but that doesn't
you do
prove
think
that
there's
there
a
is
design. You do think there's a design to this universe, right? You just talked
No,
about the
there's a lot of-
Enlightenment. The entire Enlightenment system was based upon the idea that there's a design to this universe.
There's a lot of chaos that goes on in this universe. That's one of the laws of thermodynamics is entropy, which is basically the level of chaos is always increasing. So
Ben,
we are getting more
you
and more
just
chaotic
talked about
over
a
time.
law.
Yeah, and it's that it gets more chaotic. That's one of the laws of thermodynamics is entropy, which is basically a measure of chaos, is increasing over time.
Ben, you talked about a law. So can we say that there's some order to this universe? I mean, the entire life, you would have no mathematics or sciences or engineering without laws and order.
We could talk about science with Christians. I mean, do you think the world's 6,000 years old?
I don't really know. I tend to believe
we have
it,
an
but
overwhelming
not.
amount of evidence showing otherwise.
Yeah.
I mean, we have tree rings, for example. That's an easy one for most people to figure out. Like, you can count tree rings. There's frozen trees in Siberia where we can go back and we can track this. And we can go back
So
about
Ben, there's
15,000 years
There's
there.
order with tree rings.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can know something about God, right? He sets up order. He sets up laws. We know something about that, right?
No, that doesn't show anything necessarily.
All right.
You're taking literal translations, like
no, Ben. I'm just going. Your entire worldview, your embrace of the Enlightenment requires order, requires system. That is a Judeo-Christian worldview that handed you Western civilization, and you wouldn't have America if you got away from it. All right, Ben, we got to run.
No.
Appreciate the call. Let's talk Mountain High Appliance. This Labor Day savings are continuing, but they're going to be done here tomorrow, so you got to take advantage of it. Now at Mountain High Appliances, you can save up to 70% on floor models, closeouts, and one-of-a-kinds from brands like Whirlpool, Bosch, and GE, along with more high-performing, dependable appliances at unbeatable prices. Enjoy the best selection, prices, and services at Mountain High Appliance. Visit Mountain High Appliance today and experience the difference. Go back to the original question. Yesterday, Donald Trump, Museum of the Bible, reaffirmed our nation's founding principle, saying that faith is absolutely necessary to America. Pointing out Tim Kaine the other day, saying that our rights come from society, government. What? No, our rights come from God. If you get away from faith, you don't have America in itself. Tell me I'm wrong. Give me a call, 303-696-1971, or text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Thank you to Ben, because that's a conversation not happening on any other news talk radio show. President Trump championed religious freedom yesterday at the Museum of the Bible. Can you have America without Christianity? I think Judeo-Christian values and the worldview formed the basis for Western civilization and what you have in all the freedoms, capitalistic thought, all that stuff rooted in that. You get rid of those foundations, America will crumble. And I agree with Trump that the less religious we get as a nation, the weaker we get. When faith gets stronger, good things happen to our country. In part because someone's going to have to govern humanity. Something is going to have to govern humanity. Religious people tend to govern themselves. They believe that there are rules set up by God, who's omniscient, pays attention to all the details, and you are going to be judged on those. That there is a coming judgment day. And so you restrict yourself. You self-restrict because of that. That's the importance of those cultural values. If not, government has to step in to try to restrict that. Look at these cities that are riddled with crime. People aren't governing themselves. It's the exact opposite. Oftentimes, low religious attendance. And so the government has to step in and lock everything up like they do at these targets, so you can't get anything. So you don't have America without strong Judeo-Christian values.
Although on a counterpoint, I would say we have a good number of countries across the world that have leaned more towards a theocracy in blending their church and the governance, and they don't reflect what America looks like. So blending the two and saying we need to depend on them and that being the lodestar can lead to some very, very dangerous things. And Afghanistan being one of them. That is a tremendously religious nation. They have much higher religious attendance than we do. Yet we wouldn't say that we want the American country to go that direction.
Well, no, because it's not Judeo-Christian.
Hang on. But again, that the idea that Trump to talk about is the idea of being spiritual. The idea of going into religion. So that's kind of the issue. Is
you think Trump would include Islam in that statement?
I think that Trump is dancing towards theocracy, and I'm just giving you examples of what happens when a theocracy does take hold. That it doesn't necessarily lead to the freedoms and liberties that we embrace inside of America. I know, but that's what I'm pointing out with Trump's. I think he's dancing towards a theocracy, that idea, and that worries me.
It's
deeply.
important to note that in a theocracy, the person that chooses who our elected officials are or who the government leaders are is the religious institutions.
Yes,
so
and
the
we have had
priests, the Protestants, whatever it might be, they get to choose.
Yes.
I don't think anybody's advocating for that.
We've had members
of
Congress say that the church should be telling the government what to do.
Is that the same as picking their leaders?
Yeah, pretty much, yes.
You think so?
Yes,
so if the church says thou shalt not steal, and the government should write laws that say thou shalt not steal, that's the same as picking its leaders?
I think when the church says, here's the idea. When the church says that we should be directing and forming where and how the government takes shape and who's in charge, yes, because that's the implication of those Congress people. That's the implication. It's not just the idea of, oh, look, let's just enforce the rules that are on the Ten Commandments, because here's the thing. One of those things says no adultery. Don't seem to care a damn about that one, do we? So, again, we pick and choose. We pick and choose what we want to enforce based on our religion and our society. So we would not want a theocracy. We would not embrace the idea of the church saying no adultery, and then we'd put that into law. We wouldn't embrace that. So no, that's the idea. That's the example.
Well, yeah, okay, let's go to the phone lines. Marie, Denver. Good morning, Marie. You're on with Jeff and Bill.
Morning.
Jeff, I respect your religion. I don't share it. And I also respect my beliefs as I do every other person. I think that when I was in a Catholic school, Sister Benedict Joseph, God love her, told seven-year-olds that God gave you free will and a conscience, and he wants you to use both. And that's what has been my rule throughout my life. Now, I have the feeling I'm more afraid of her than anybody else. However, in this country, this Christian country, Jeff, we had 250 years of slavery where Christian men raped black women in order to increase their slaves because that was money in the bank. They bred women the same way you and your wife bred dogs. I think it is blasphemy to say that this was all Christian.
All right, Marie, would you say that the slave owners that were raping slaves were acting like Christians?
No. But I think
So,
they did. I
can
think
you
they
say
went to church on Sunday. I think you can convince yourself of practically anything.
They also, I would submit in the conversation here that those slave owners probably would define themselves as being spiritual.
But I don't know, because I don't have any slave, as far as I know.
So what was the impetus for freeing the slaves? What was the moral foundation for releasing the slaves?
Basically it was a Christian group, but also
where, Marie, did the rights come from?
They were what we as a consensus. You can't show me.
No.
This is for you and I.
The rights of the slave to be treated as a human being, not a property, did not come from a moral consensus. The foundation of that argument in this nation was that they are human beings created by God.
That really sounds good. And it only took us 250 years.
Right.
Longer than this country is. And I disagree with that. Because when you start to
You
say...
disagree that was the moral justification for the Civil War?
The moral justification doesn't have to be a Christian justification. You're saying that this was a Christian nation from the beginning.
But the justification for freeing the slaves was the notion that the slaves are human beings.
Right, and it came from
created by whom? By society? You think we just as a society just said, wow, okay, well, I guess now they're not property. You think that was the argument back in the 1860s?
That was the beauty of this country, that we asserted those rights initially.
And where did those rights come from?
Those rights came from white men, many of whom were slave owners, who decided that that's how they wanted to build a country.
What was the role of religion and rights in the Confederation states? How did they outline their rights and their religion?
They argued that the slaves were property.
And that it was ordained by God as the natural order.
They were wrong in that argument. But where did they argue? Where did we as the Union made the arguments that they were human beings?
But
that was based upon the idea that there is a God that gives us rights.
No,
and the argument to keep them as slaves was based on a God that had given a natural order.
You're talking about how this country was Christian from the beginning.
Correct.
And I'm pointing out to you that we also had slavery longer than we were a country. We had slavery for 250 years, and we won't celebrate our birthday for 250 years till next year. And that has to be dealt with. In a Christian context, they forgot they were Christian or said they were,
No, Marie, which nations were the first ones to reject slavery?
Britain.
Okay, and what is the historical religious grounds in Britain?
I really don't know, and I don't...
Really? Come on, Marie. What do you think, they're Muslims?
They're Anglican.
They're Christians. It was Christianity that helped lead the end of slavery.
Yeah, but Marie, the only reason that they're Anglicans and Protestants is because the Pope wouldn't let the king divorce a wife again. So he decided to make his own religion.
I could care less, okay?
I'm just putting context in here.
I'm talking about in this country. I don't want the idea that we're a Christian nation from the beginning and that God dictated or we talked to God or whatever. That's what I'm questioning. And you can't say, well, but it only took us 250 years, and then we decided, maybe they are not property. That's a biggie. And
All right. Well, I mean, Marie, history has shown that it was Christianity that led to the end of the slave trade. And it was rooted in that belief that human beings are created by God.
And the people arguing and fighting for the slave trade also used God as the justification. Thanks for the call, Marie. It was on both sides. That's important to the conversation.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it is.
No, because the conversation is whether or not a secular nation or a nation that roots its rights in God matters. So because some other religion got it wrong doesn't mean that all religion is bad.
Oh, no, I'm just saying that we in this nation of the U.S., we used God as the justification to stop slavery and as the justification to continue slavery. We used it both ways. We just need to be fair in the conversation.
But no, what's the point, though, Bill?
The point is that assuming because we are making this decision based on religion doesn't always make us right. And that and we're saying that if it's the Judeo-Christian that led us out of the path of slavery, it's also our Judeo-Christian history that led us to continuing the path of slavery because that's what our Confederate states told us. That's what they told us in their founding documents over and over again.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my original question.
Yes.
Can America exist as a secular nation that does not believe rights come from God?
Yes, I do believe we could, simply because of the unique nature of America. Because for decades upon decades and generations upon generations.
What is that unique nature, Bill?
I'm getting there. I didn't get to finish my sentence. I was getting there. I'll rewind a little bit. For decades and decades and generations upon generations, we were a melting pot. And we have been an amalgamation of different beliefs and different religions. So I would say that if there is one nation that is probably best primed for this kind of an experiment or this kind of an idea going forward of being an absolutely secular nation, we probably are one of the best experiments out there. Are we at there right now? No, I don't think so. But
and that is just a wild rereading of history. We're not just a melting pot. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, we are.
We're overwhelmingly Protestant Christian. And we have strong Catholics, and we have strong Judaism. But this idea that we're just this kind of amorphous melting pot of just a ton of different values that all came together and settled on a Judeo-Christian worldview?
No, I said that this country for generations and decades has been an amalgamation of different societies and religions. Different societies and religions have immigrated here. Yes. And that goes all the way back to the Chinese in our founding when we're building railways. They didn't come as Christians.
They were huge numbers. They made up a big percentage of this nation.
Again, hang on. Not Christian. All I'm saying is that we have people across different demographics and across different religions that have created America. And all I'm saying is that if there was a place in which all of those blending together had a chance to create a secular nation, this is a decent experiment to try one. I don't know. Don't know if we could.
No. It removes rights. It puts it in the hands of people, and it's the fast path to tyranny and the destruction of this country. All right, we'll continue. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show.
This is News Talk 710 KNUS. It's the end of the hour. We're going to come back.
Bill and I are pressing it all.
I know, my friend. That was so much fun when you lose track of the clock. It's when I'm like, oh my gosh, look what time it is.
Dave Flaherty is going to join us next. He's the president of Magellan Strategies. He's got a great new poll out about Colorado voters, and it's like, I'd say for everyone but Gabe Evans, it's bad news.
Yes, it's
Gabe Evans, he's the only one that looks good in this one.
Statewide Democrats, you paying attention? This is not good news for you.
All right, we'll continue. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
We are Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.